Sarah Campbell from Humanities are going to talk about uncertain futures, about inequality in art and research.
Thank you. It should just work if I just press. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Good morning, everyone. Just to a little bit more depressing, unfortunately, than that wonderful talk we just had. Unfortunately, my colleague Sarah Campbell wasn't able to be here today because she's unwell with some sort of flu or something horrible. There's lots of horrible bugs going around at the moment. Thankfully, not COVID, but she is quite unwell. But thank you so much for having me here to talk about this project that we've been doing in humanities around older women and the inequalities that they face in later life. And sometimes when I talk about this project with my students, I say to them, you know, how many of you are over 50? And we tend to get not very many in that cohort. And then I say, how many of you want to live past 50? And then, of course, that sort of, we get a lot of hands at that point. And then I said, how many of you want to live a fulfilling life past 50? Ashley has told us how to do that, so now at least we know that. But I think a lot of the students are all like, oh yes, definitely want to do that. But unfortunately, what we found through our research is that for many older women particularly, life can be much more challenging and they face a lot more inequalities than certainly we even imagined that they did. So this is an art and research project. So it essentially is it's kind of a participatory research project where we engage with 100 women from across Manchester, lots of very diverse group of women, and we ask them questions about their experiences around work, whether that work is paid, whether that work was unpaid. And we have sort of generated a lot of, they have been very much a part of both the interview process, but also part of analysing the results of that research. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment with you. But first, I just wanted to play this little video we have, which our advisory group of women who are all over 50 made about their experiences as a woman over 50, and here is what they know. So hopefully, I should just be able to press somehow. I'm not really sure how this works. Is there anyone like... Sorry, maybe someone will be able to help me. My technical skills are not brilliant. Oh wow, there you go. Thank you.
I know that women over 50 can become invisible in the workplace and in society.
I'm a woman over 50, but as active now as I have been in my 20s, if not more. Particularly now, I think I'm probably far more busier than I was in my 20s.
As a woman over 50, here's what I know. I know how to bring diverse women together and use their transferable skills.
I know how to manage and promote a flexible working system, providing a trusting and caring work culture.
I know how to say no to discrimination and racism.
But I've lived on this earth for over 65 years. And yeah, I've made mistakes, but I've learned so much more too.
I know that I have the wisdom to be able to handle racism in a non-aggressive way.
So these are all of these women actually are on our advisory group. We have a really inspirational group of women who are part of this project. And this project is really kind of a wonderful example of the value of community and connectedness. It has developed essentially from a kind of a web of connections that we've made across Greater Manchester. It's begun with an artist, Suzanne Lacey, who I'll talk about in a moment. We have Manchester Art Gallery, which is our hub essentially where everything happens and has glued us all together as part of this big project. We have an advisory group made up of these wonderful women who are just incredibly inspirational and active. And then we have a research team from the University of Manchester, which is myself, and Manchester Metropolitan, which is Sarah Campbell. So our artist, Suzanne Lacey, she's a renowned pioneer in socially engaged and public performance art. And she tackles essentially she's an American artist and she has tackled lots of difficult issues with a view to making social change. And I think all of us, when we first met Suzanne, and she doesn't mind me saying this, when we first met her, we honestly didn't know what she was talking about, because she had lots of ideas, and we were sort of like, we weren't really sure, because for a lot of us, art is, we just was like, oh, we're going to do something on the wall of the, you know, we're going to paint a picture, or we're going to make something. And she was talking in sort of very abstract terms about bringing women together in communities and webs, and we were sort of very confused by what that all would mean. But as the project has evolved, we've realized actually she had this incredible idea in her head, and it is all sort of working in this sort of connected way. Manchester Art Gallery is where has been the sort of the central hub where everything has happened as part of this art and research project. They have designed and developed and housed the installation. There is still currently an installation at Manchester Art Gallery. We're on phase 2 now of our project. And they have established a program of action around the project as well. So essentially what we did at Manchester Art Gallery, so what was this thing that we produced in the end, we live performance interviewed all the 100 women in the gallery. So we brought all of these 100 women to the gallery. We sat them in a booth which we created, which was soundproofed. People could walk by and watch us interviewing, but they couldn't hear what we were saying. And then once we had interviewed all these women as part of this live performance piece, we anonymized all of their transcripts and we displayed them in the gallery. And you can go and they're still on display in the gallery, so you can go and read all the transcripts and hear what these women have to say. So it was very much part of bringing people to the gallery. But what was a really amazing part of the project was bringing women to the gallery who never ever would have set foot in there in the first place. So one of the women who we interviewed said that, for me, an art gallery was an art gallery for the elite, not for me. It really introduced me, not just me, but the women we worked with. They are given an opportunity to exposure, to buildings, to space that we thought was for the elite, but now they've introduced that space where we feel genuinely welcomed, and we're being told it's not just for us, it's for you. So it's about the idea of social inclusion as part of the project as well. We have an incredible advisory group who you've just heard from. They're women over 50 from various groups across Manchester. We met on Zoom from 2019 onwards. We met weekly on Zoom because obviously the pandemic hit, so we had we called it the COVID plus effect. It gave us a chance to meet in the evenings when all the kids were in bed and all the other things that the jobs had been done. And we met weekly, developed this incredible connections, and now we continue to meet monthly on Zoom and in person when we can. And then obviously we have the research team, which is made up of myself and Sarah mainly as the research leads, but it is a participatory research project. So all of the research is done with a research team from the women on the advisory group as well. So they're a very, very core part of conducting the research. And together, the women on the advisory group and ourselves, we developed this matrix, which is painted onto the wall in the art gallery. So if you go in, you'll be able to see this. This was looking at sort of what are the inequalities facing older women in Greater Manchester. And we came up with a sort of, in the centre, the sort of the inequalities, the general inequalities that we thought women faced around race, migration, gender, disability, age, obviously being an important one. But also all these other sort of things that influenced and impacted on women's lives, such as isolation, COVID, financial instability, changes in pension ages, caring responsibilities, so all these other factors which influenced us as well. So just to give you an overview, I think, of the 100 women that we interviewed, and you can go see them in the gallery, as I've said already. The age profile was quite diverse, so 50s, 60s, 70s were the main profile of our women. A sort of an equal spread between those who were in work and those who were retired, but obviously some still seeking work. 63% were from a minority ethnic background, and I think this is what makes our project quite unique, in that we do have a very diverse spread of women from across Manchester, so it reflects the demographic structures of Manchester as well. Only 36% had a private or occupational pension, so many of these women were living on state pensions. Migration status, we had 12% were asylum seekers. However, a lot of the women were from migration backgrounds as well. And we had lots of women taking part in unpaid labours, whether that is caring responsibilities, so looking after elderly relatives, dependent relatives, or children or grandchildren, or volunteering in some aspects in their neighbourhood or in their communities. So with the women, we sat down, we looked at all the interviews, we read them, and we devised a number of themes that we saw that were rising out of all of the interviews. So common things, 4 common things that were coming out of these interviews. What we found was that many of the women were talking about that different types of circumstances influenced their decision making, whether that was the culture that they came from, their gender often influenced how they would make decisions about working, for example, deciding to work part-time or full-time. Their family had huge influences on them, and also their finances. We found that some women said that, or most women said that they had different choices and opportunities in lives which impacted on their situations. And most of the time it was to do more with the lack of choice or lack of opportunity for women that they mentioned. So things like menopause, migration, housing, so whether they had a mortgage or whether they had to rent properties, for example. This was a really big part of the project, recognition, contribution and endurance. All of the women, all 100 of them, without fail, mentioned all of the wonderful skills, experiences, contributions they were making. All of them were volunteering in their neighborhoods, looking after children, grandchildren, taking care of relatives. There was always, women were contributing so much, and a lot of it, or many of them, felt very undervalued in that. And then finally, which is the one I'm going to focus on today, is inequalities and exclusion. So again, a very, very large proportion of our women referred to the fact that they felt excluded or they felt that they had been discriminated in some way on a number of grounds. So if we focus on that particular issue, what we found in our research was that many women felt that they faced discrimination on a number of the classic grounds that we would have covered by our Equality Act, for example, race, gender, age, disability. But also we found that women, particularly these older women, were experiencing a lot of multiple or intersectional discrimination. So this is the idea that it's not just on grounds of race alone that they weren't getting a job. It may have to do with the fact that they were older and they were of a particular race or colour. That would impact their abilities to get jobs or get work. But also we found that there were a number of structural inequalities which was creating social exclusion for a lot of these women. So things like language ability, their migration status, and a lot of women got stuck in what we described as the volunteering trap. So women started volunteering and then got stuck in that and weren't able to move into paid employment. So if we look at inequalities first, so the different types, I'm just going to give you some examples of the things that women were telling us. So an age, a good classic example of the age one was a woman who said that she wanted to earn some extra money for Christmas, so she decided that she was going to go work in a department store in Manchester. But when she went into the department store to work, and she'd been doing this type of work for years, so she was very skilled in what she did, they basically told her, actually, we're not going to put you in that front of house area, you need to work over here. They said, can you be the mumsy one? You know, the one that will serve the old ladies and that, and you can talk to them. And she said, I felt like the old bird on the side. So she sort of pushed aside because of her age, essentially. Race was one that came up a lot as an issue. So again, this is MICRA. So she was a nurse, and she was a fully qualified nurse, came to the UK, got a job in a care home, but she felt constantly undermined by her colleagues. So she said the other carers, because they are white, they want to tell me what to do with my patients. If I tell them what to do, another nurse might tell me that she's been there for years and she knows better. They really, really undermine your intelligence and your understanding. I don't deserve that kind of treatment because I'm just trying my best and just a human being, just like anyone else. But whatever goes wrong, they find a black person to blame for it. And that was her feeling around, and this experience was not uncommon. This was one that we saw time and time again in the interviews. And then just to give an example of kind of intersectional discrimination. So this was a Delara who was a migrant. She'd been trying to get work for a very, very long time, was really struggling to do so. And again, that's not an uncommon story for lots of our migrant women. So she went along to sort of a recruitment exercise where she was asked to sort flowers into different containers. And the people who could do it the fastest or the best essentially were the ones who were going to get the job. And she said she worked incredibly hard, but she's a very diligent person. So she said, I was really trying to get them all into the right slot so that they couldn't come back and say that I put them into the wrong slot. But unfortunately, they ended up essentially telling her that she was very lazy because she did it very slow. She also had she said she has nerve damage on one finger, And she said they didn't take any of that into account. They didn't take into account that all the other people there were 18 years of age or less, and she was over 50. She had a nerve damage in her finger, and she just said, they just basically came up to me and said, you're a very lazy person, you're not going to get this job. So again, we have a sort of an example there of that kind of intersectional discrimination, where it's not necessarily her age or her disability, it's that combination of the two together that she was discriminated on. And then in terms of social inequalities and social exclusion, what we've been finding is that there's three sort of main areas where the women that we spoke to at least said that they found that they were being excluded because of these issues. The first was the migration system that we have. Currently the migration system, particularly for asylum seekers, is they can get stuck in a legal limbo essentially. So they come to the UK, they make an application for asylum, but that process can take almost 5 years to complete. During that time, they can't work, they can't take part in any sort of, it's just a very kind of socially excluded system. They often don't have the language, they can't, a lot of them do try to volunteer, but it's a very sort of, it's in areas where they're not skilled. So lots of people work in kitchens, for example, volunteering, but they can't actually work to make money. And a lot of them feel that their physical and mental health declines during this period. And then when they come out of that, they're not able to find work because they've been 5 years out of the labour market. They're 5 years older than they were when they started. And particularly for older women who claim asylum later in life, that is obviously very exclusionary. So Mari, who's 67, she said those 5 years were very, very difficult because they don't allow to work, just voluntary. No college, no job, no anything. When you can't go to any job, the first thing you think, you're not useful, you're not able to do anything, and this feeling is very bad. Support services were the other thing that we found where the systems were unfortunately kind of excluding women. So even though the support systems are supposed to be there to help people, we found that actually it had an exclusionary effect in some circumstances, because women felt that they were being, when they went to a job centre to get a job, they were being pushed to take any job rather than being sort of supported into a job that was useful to them and to use their skills that they had. So Cara Sawan talks about the job centre pushing her constantly to take particular jobs, but then also the problems around universal credit and the fact that you can't work over so many hours, otherwise you start losing your universal credit, so people are not incentivised to work in that way. And then another issue we found was around volunteering. So what we found was that lots of women volunteer, and lots of people volunteer because they want to, which is wonderful, but lots of people volunteer because they feel they have to. So job centres push people into volunteering, and lots of women say that they see this as a way into the employment market. It should be, but it isn't. What we found was that lots of women, older women are volunteering, but they're not able to convert that into a full paying job. So Kesrawan, who also spoke about the job centres, she said that she'd worked as a volunteer in a particular department in Manchester for a number of years. She applied for her job that she was doing as a volunteer. She applied for that job in a paid capacity 5 times, but she didn't get it. And then 15 times further, she applied for other jobs within the same department, which were advertised. She had the experience, the qualification, the skills. She still didn't get that job. And she felt that that was because they now viewed her as a volunteer and not somebody who was to be taken seriously for that particular role. But what's amazing about these women is that despite all of the things that they suffer and that they've been through in their lives, they have this incredible endurance. Felicity, who says, she said, you know, it is what it is. We all get there, don't we, in the end, and most of us come out smiling. And they want action as well. So these women were not going to let Sarah and I, who were doing the research, we couldn't sit down for a minute. We just have to keep going. So they have constant plans for what they want to do with this research. Femme Capable, who is one of our amazing women who has been through, she's had an incredible life, but she said she will not give up. I will carry on their journey to empower other women and to encourage them. And this brings us to our policy action points that we're now working on with the women to try and activate some of these. They're very keen that women who are younger than them don't suffer the same inequalities that they do. So they're very, very keen to make interventions, not just in older life, but also at specific points during people's working lives. So when women are making decisions to take maternity leave, for example, that they think about the impact that might have on their future pensions, etc. So they're very keen to work on that, and we've had discussions with different organisations like the DWP around issues around, because of the push towards self-employment now, for example, for younger women, we need to have auto-enrollment pensions, for example, for those particular types of women. So these types of interventions are things we're working on. Raising awareness obviously comes naturally with that, but as Ashley so nicely put it, awareness is not very good. It is useful, but it's only a starting point in the whole process. And we are looking about eliminating gaps in protection. So as a lawyer, I'll be looking at sort of the laws around the Equality Act, our pension laws, our migration laws, and how they socially exclude people. We're looking at user-focused policy development and service provision as well. But really, one of the key areas we want to focus on is the role of employers, because we think employers are actually a very key part of this particular process. And just as an example of how employers can be so important, we had one particular migrant woman, Victoria. She was 63. She migrated to the UK 22 years ago, and she had a very typical migrant experience. So she came here. She was in immigration limbo for about 5 years before they were able to provide her with a full-time status in the UK. She worked on 0 hours contracts for agency work. She had a very fragmented working life due to illness, children, etc. So she was a very typical, everything that could go wrong went wrong for Victoria. But then she said there was this light bulb moment when an employer spotted her. She went to work as an agency worker for this employer. They said, she's really good, we want to hire you. And they hired her. And she said in her interview, she said it was such a relief to be acknowledged and to have someone appreciate you. They are different, and that when she means they, she means her employer. They have given me an opportunity, and from what I have experienced right from the interview itself, they don't treat me like I am different. So a real sort of proactive employer who is taking equality seriously. So I'm going to leave you on the happy note, even though that was a little bit on the depressing side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much, Lee. Much appreciated that. I'm glad you mentioned you were a lawyer, so I need to be careful about
that's okay. Yeah, you're all good.
Any quick questions? I'm conscious of time. We've got a lot to go through. Very, very
detailed
stories.
Sorry.
And we see this in my field in medicine. Stories are so powerful, and it's very interesting to see those stories coming forward. Well, if there's no questions, that's fine. But we'll be around it a little bit. I hope.
Yes, hopefully. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.